Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where we covenant to weave together the fabric of community from the strands of our separate lives. We are an inclusive, welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We adhere to the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, which you can find on one of the newcomer cards on the back of the chairs or at the card on the welcome table. Please feel free to take a card with you. This is a great opportunity to silence any noise-making devices as we prepare for our morning worship. And now, in the spirit of hospitality, I invite you to greet someone you did not come with this morning.
Good morning. I am Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, so pleased to welcome you in person and online with our streaming. And we have one announcement this morning is pre-prepared, and Alex is going to run that right now. Hopefully it won't be too louder.
Service auction launch is going to be Saturday, November 5th at 6 p.m. at the Fellowship.
That sounds great. And what kind of offerings, if I were considering putting one in, should I think about?
I mean, just about anything you can come up with. People put in offerings of like artwork that they've created themselves. They put in offerings for events like gatherings and dinners, family events like a movie night or a game night. What else?
What about like a fresh baked apple pie? Could I offer that maybe?
Oh yeah. Listen, absolutely. Homemade food goes crazy.
So it sounds like there's a lot of ideas for the service auction offerings. They could be game nights, family nights, dinners, gatherings in nature, in your house. They can be offered at the Fellowship. It could be a homemade baked good or dinner. Is there really any limit for what you can offer?
No.
So it sounds like if I have any questions about what I want to offer, I should maybe reach out to someone on the service auction committee, including myself or Donna Perch. Who else?
Toby Tyler, Gabor, Barbara Stasiak, Susie Harris, myself. That's kind of your main group.
Sounds good. I look forward to the service auction.
I'm looking forward to that. And I've also put in the sermon topic of the winner's choice, just to say, if you have any kind of burning theological questions you want to share with everybody in the fellowship. Also, next Sunday after the service is our trunk or treat. We've invited the whole community of Morristown, and I hope you all will come. It's an event for all ages, and I'm looking forward to it. I've been, as an interim, I live in apartments so much, I don't get kids come to my door anymore. It makes me sad. I loved that back in the day. So, trunk or treat next Sunday. Also, this morning, if you're online, you'll notice at about 10:25 it's going to look a little chaotic, like what's going on. You don't have to get up and go out of your house because the fire drill's not there. We're doing a fire drill, just a first service this morning, 10:25. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that we have locations that we go to in the fire drill. So folks here in the sanctuary, we are asking that we go down to the playground. Everybody in the building who's participating in other programming, we're asking them to go to the other side of the parking lot as a meeting spot. Here's one of the key things about this experience, which is we do this so that everybody gets out safely. As a parent, I can tell you the first thing that would come to my mind if I had a child in another part of the building and the fire alarm goes off, it would be to run up and get them. Please don't do that. You would endanger yourself and others and first responders, as well as they would need to find you and your child, because we count we take a count of all of our children in every class and group. So we get them out there, we count them and verify they're all out of the building. Very important. So just please go outside the side door here with the rest of the folks in the sanctuary. And if you want to go to the meeting spot where the children are, you're welcome to do that. Please just don't take them until the count is completed. Fire drills were not something I paid a lot of attention to until after September 11th, 1991, when I got to thinking, realizing there was a lot of spirituality and philosophy and thinking about meaning that comes in the aftermath of tragedy, loss, and trauma, and it's good to be prepared. There are some things you can prepare for, especially preparing oneself spiritually for things that can happen. I first kind of got an inkling about this. It's many years ago now, over 30 years ago, a young minister and in a congregation. And Barry told me this story. Barry and Jake were both serving the board of trustees of the congregation I was serving at this time. And Barry and Jake often liked to drive together when they would go to the board meeting at the congregation I was serving. And Barry called Jake up. Usually Jake called, and Barry called Jake up. And the phone rang, and then Jake picked up. And Barry said, Jake, everything okay? And the line was silent for a minute. And then it was a funny sound. At first he thought, was that a cat or something? And then he realized, no, that was Jake. And Barry said, Jake, are you okay? And he said, well, and Barry had never heard Jake like this. And Barry said, I'm just going to come on over. And Jake said, I'm just going to stop by. I don't need to stay long. I just stop by. I want to see how you're doing. So Barry drives over to Jake's house, and he gets there. And it turns out Jake's wife had died 20 minutes before. And Barry got there, and when Barry got there, Jake was actually so glad to see him. He just kind of fell into his arms, and the first responders were there, and all kind of, it was all of that business. And he stayed with him for a while. It was time for the board meeting to start, and Barry was able to call one of the trustees who lived nearest to the church. They didn't have the cell phones, the cell phones yet weren't around. And let everybody know, hey, we're not going to be there right away. And then Barry eventually was able to go over. And actually, Barry didn't have to stay that long. He was probably there maybe 20 minutes. But one of the things that that's so vital, so wonderful about community is this ability we have to be there for one another in times when things happen that we don't expect, things that are difficult. We can catch each other when we've just got to let go for a moment and collect ourselves. And I remember after that experience thinking about, how do I want to be prepared in my life for whatever might come? And we can't always fully prepare, but it really did get me to thinking. And eventually to what I now like to call my theology of fire drills. So as we conclude with a fire drill today, I'll think a little bit about fire drills and some of the spiritual questions it might raise for us and some recommendations I have. Chalices.
Do you have the words for the chalice lighting, Al? Please join me in reading the words that we've been using for our chalice lighting while Reverend Joel lights the chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
This next time frame of music is actually a hymn as well as some support from the choir. So Life Calls Us On by Jason Shelton. I invite you to stand in spirit or in body if you would like. This next Saturday is a memorial for Sharon Glickman. She was a beloved member here at the fellowship for many years, and especially active in the women's group. And Unitarian Universalism had the blessing and the privilege of supporting feminist spirituality as it really began to emerge as a significant presence in American religious life in the late 1970s. And there's continues to be a vital and important presence of women's spirituality here at the fellowship. One of the gifts that Sharon has left with us, and this is the tradition here. Wanted to be sure that we had a Sunday in which we lit a candle here on the chalice table. Beth Hayward gave me a note of a passage this morning as she came in. She writes, "I just came back from visiting my daughter, Nicola, at House with Heart. House with Heart is a home for abandoned girls in Nepal. Visiting a third world country, for me, was mind-boggling, heart-opening, and deeply humbling. An amazing trip. I'm glad to be home." Beth pointed out to me that the congregation here has supported House with Heart. And it seems to me also serendipitous or perhaps synchronous that Beth has had this passage and this return and brought this morning. Fire drills and longer losses, the child's loss of a family and caregivers is a kind of trauma in itself, one that goes on a great deal longer than perhaps the loss of a house or a business. But the two are similar in the way that we experience tremendous loss. And House with Heart and congregations like this and communities that create fire departments and police departments, all of this is a way in which communities can be present. The people of communities can be present for one another. I have a colleague who is a chaplain. Chaplains are clergy that specialize in being present for others when there's trauma and loss. And as we mark at this time the work of this community to be present for each of us, I want to share this chaplain's blessing, because as each of us responds to others in our community who may be in need, perhaps in the way that Barry responded to Jake, we'll encounter some of the questions, concerns, the worries, the personal imperfections that we have that chaplains encounter all of the time. And this is a blessing entitled A Chaplain's Blessing by Andrea Hawkins Camper. This ministry isn't all prayers and beautiful moments, nor is it all lament and trauma. It's not even both and. Because this work is something greater than you, greater than me, greater than us, greater even than the whole of those we serve. This work is a calling, and we're doing it day after day, night after night, page after page, call after call, visit after visit. We are doing the hard and holy work to which we are called. This matters. This matters because when we feel we did not do enough, We did not care enough. We did not do enough of something. It matters because we were still there. We were there in that moment with that person, with that patient, with that prisoner, with that family. We were giving. We were loving. We were ministering. You, me, us. Ministers, chaplains, members, friends, visitors, neighbors, all holy witnesses to the divine in all its messy humanity. Us. We did it. We are doing it. We'll do it again. And every time we do it, it will be enough. For we cannot give more than we have. And for us, we give what we can when there is nobody else who can give. And that is enough. It is enough. You are enough. We are enough. May it be well with you in these days, and may it be well with those souls who entrust themselves to our care, our mutual care, for however fleeting a moment it may be. May it be well. For this blessing and all of the meditations, contemplations, prayers, we say, amen, so be it. Blessed be. This hymn is number 1012, if you like to look in the books, or here it is on the screen, When I Am Frightened. I invite you to stand in spirit or in body if you would like, and sit up in your chair in spirit if you're watching online, and let's sing together.
This morning's reading is Community Means Strength by Starhawk. We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned, we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength to do the work that needs to be done, arms to hold us when we falter. Community means a circle of healing, a circle of friends, someplace where we can be free.
In a day when, in times when we could send checks by mail, and many of us did for most of our lives, or now you could just pull out your phone and do a Venmo or a Zelle. Why have an offertory in the service? It's a spiritual practice, a reminder that we give the energy and time of our lives that we collect through our work, our resources. We make one another vulnerable to each other by this commitment of the energy of our lives. And we make also that spiritual practice of care for the larger community, which is why we split our offering every week, 50-50. This week, we're splitting it with a fund set up by the Morristown Religious Communities to benefit Pastor Sidney Williams, minister of the Morristown Bethel AME Church, and his family. The family had a house fire, it destroyed their home and all their possessions. Our congregations have worked together. The Fellowship and Bethel AME Church have worked together in Morristown for many years. We support our fellow congregation and community this morning. You can donate via text to give number. The number is 73256. Use the keyword MUUF followed by the dollar amount. And if you're online, the online order of service has the link where you can select Sunday offering from the menu once you've clicked on it. The first congregation I served as a minister who was called, and was the second congregation I started. I was kind of ornery and passionate as a young Unitarian Universalist minister, and it was a time when we were having some theological disputes. We'd had a long theological dispute between Unitarian Universalists who were Christian and Unitarian Universalists who were humanists, and I had been, as I mentioned last week, I'd been a very passionate humanist, and then I found I was in my humanism kind of a jerk. And kind of mean to others, and I didn't want to be like that anymore. And I had the great privilege to a group of folks who ranged from Universalist and Christian to very humanist, loving nature and science and finding their spirituality in that. A group of people who were also impatient with the unneeded division. They were forming a community, and they were looking for a minister who would appreciate that mutual care and love. And that happened to be the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church in Littleton, Colorado. And I was so glad to be able to go there. And I served with them, and I'd been serving with them just over 7 years. And in 1999, in April, there were the shootings at the high school, just 2 blocks away from the building that the congregation had built. And I don't know if you've ever seen one of your ministers wear a collar, a clerical collar. I actually own one. I had bought one and owned it thinking I would use it mostly for like demonstrations, just to make sure that people in public would know that a clergy person was in this demonstration, so especially for things like women's reproductive rights or for marriage equality, things like that. But when I actually could hear the shootings, and the police line was being set up as I ran out of the office to figure out what was going on. I ran home to check on my family. They were fine. I said, don't go. The kids were being sent home, so the kid's mom was making sure they would be home and safe. And I ran to the police line then, having put my collar on, and spent the rest of that day showing up for families as they met their children at the meeting site. As teenagers came out of that school, and police had a staging area where parents could pick their children up. I saw a lot that day. I was not prepared to do that work. Even the experience with Barry and Jake, really, I don't think anybody's really ever quite prepared for that kind of work. But a couple of days later, one of the things that, an image that stayed with me, I took my family to a restaurant, and a group of kids walked in, and at this point there was this fashion trend among some kids who had more of a goth or punk approach to life, and there was this kid, and I swear he had like foot-long spikes coming out made of his hair. They were like thick hair spikes, and it was actually pretty amazing. And each of them different colors, and some of the other kids that came had like studs, and they shaved their heads and they had studs, and in this restaurant at the table just next to us was a family, and they were very conservative, and you could tell that the children sat very carefully, spoke when spoken to, and the dad had this buzz cut, and the mom had a, is there such a thing as a conservative mom perm? Because okay, yeah, it looked like it, yeah. And those kids walked in, and the restaurant got very quiet. And those kids just really, they come from a movie, and really they just kind of wanted to get some dinner. And this man in the booth next to me looked up, and he looked at those kids, and he looked at the quiet room, and he got up and he hugged those kids. And he said, "We love you." I've never forgotten that moment. The expression on the face of the kids, utterly opposite of what they expected when they walked in. For me, that was also a response to trauma, a trauma they were experiencing, because in those days, everywhere these kids were going, they were being looked at as though they might commit an act of violence, and really, they were nonviolent. They had the point of their style, in some respects, was to say, we don't want to participate in the violence. I felt kind of alone in understanding things about trauma in 1999, and then the terrible day, September 11th, 2001 happened. And so a couple of years later, I was talking with some of my Unitarian Universalist colleagues who had either been in this area and had gone to the site of the World Trade Towers, and had learned about trauma response. And a couple of colleagues, one was a fire department chaplain, and two were police department chaplains. And I actually hadn't realized about the fire department chaplain. I'd had a colleague who was a police department chaplain who spoke with me on the phone after I'd had the experience at Columbine. She reminds me every now and then. She listened to me for a couple of hours as I needed to talk about what had happened. She said, "I was putting an air conditioner into my window as you talked." I just needed to talk. We learned so much when we started the Unitarian Universalist Trauma Response Ministry. We Unitarian Universalists are used to being on the edge of, the cutting edge of social change, of developing spirituality in new and creative ways. But we were a bit surprised that when it came to providing care in the aftermath of disasters, as we founded the Trauma Response Ministry for our Association of Congregations in North America, we were one of the last religious groups, perhaps in the world, to organize a formal trauma response organization. We wondered about that. We were meeting in a retreat, and after a couple of days of realizing, why are we the last religious group to do this? We got to talking about theology, and it was finally it was one of the fire department chaplain who said, "Well, look at what you have to do to respond to trauma." So when you respond to trauma, say a house is burning down, there's a pattern of response, and there's a command structure. There's a fire chief, there's somebody who's in charge on the truck. They have certain procedures that they go through. It's pretty hierarchical. There's captains, there's lieutenants, it's in some ways almost like military. Unitarian Universalists have spent about 4 centuries trying to figure out how to take out the hierarchy of a religious organization. And all of a sudden, we were faced with having to put it back in. It took us days to figure out, can we even do this? Can we honor our spiritual ancestors and do this? Well, the reality is, if you don't have a command structure, you show up to a fire and you start debating which hose to use and you're going to have a vote on it? No.
Form a committee.
Yeah, form a committee. All right. Somebody dies. In a police response, a fire response, people can die needlessly. So even those of us who are spiritual first responders to traumatic events, we have to have, turns out, command structures. We have a duty to keep one another safe when responding, which we learned actually later when we had a whole team respond to Hurricane Katrina and sent them down to an area without clean water, food, places to sleep, and other dangers. So, having learned that we could, in fact, as Unitarian Universalists, create a command structure and have it be hierarchical, but we didn't have to give up our ultimate goal of not having that kind of a dominant or hierarchical practice in our movement in general, or even our personal spiritualities. It was kind of a relief, actually. And in some ways, it helped me understand some of the ways in which congregations have to grow and change, too. Part of it is a matter of trust, for example. I've served 10 congregations as a minister and been involved with 3 others, and always seen this struggle between how do we make decisions. In a smaller congregation, especially if it's a very small congregation, everybody can sit in the room like this. There might be 50 of us here this morning. I'm noticing that not a lot of parents came this morning. They're probably upstairs hanging around the kids. A congregation, if it were this size, if we had to make a big decision together, say about a social justice project we wanted for the whole congregation, or if we were going to move and sell the building and buy a new building, some huge decision like that. In a smaller congregation, you could actually sit in a room this size, look at each other, and after a couple of hours, make a decision, come to a consensus about a big decision like that. And that's actually part of your roots as a congregation. Thing is that you've grown so much in the last couple decades that you're over 300 now, and you can't do that with 300 people. It doesn't work. Generally, what happens is that you'll find you have a 3-hour congregational meeting, and you still aren't really sure if you ought to make the decision or not. There's a whole different process once you become a larger congregation, and part of it is that spiritual and practical way of entrusting decisions to others so that you don't have a whole congregation trying to decide, the old copier died, do we want to buy a new copier? Truth be told, not even your board of trustees should be making that decision, which currently it does, and we're working on changing that. Because you got other things you got to be doing. The way you show up for each other. The way you show up for your community. The way you show up for your children. These are ministries no one else can do. You can hire a consultant to get you a good copier that you need. Anybody can do that who has basic skills for it. Nobody can do your ministry but you. So that's one of the interim projects we have together, is to work on that. Okay, theology of fire drills. For the first time ever, when I was in another congregation, this one in northern New York, we had a fire drill, and they'd never actually pulled the alarm. So when the alarm goes off here in about 5 minutes, it looks like, it's loud, it's annoying. You'll go out this door, head toward the parking lot, or just stay outside if you don't want to walk too far, that's fine. The fire marshal came for this fire drill in northern New York, and we actually asked the fire chief to set the alarm off, and when he did, the panel had been installed improperly and burst into flame. I was so glad we actually had the full fire drill that day, because we got it repaired, of course. 3 tools I have for you in these few minutes I have left. 3 tools to take with you when terrible things happen. The first one I've already told you. Sometimes we need an authority. And sometimes we just need a meaning authority in our own selves. When disaster strikes, simplicity is important. Have something memorized. Bad things can happen, and you don't have time to think about why or what to do or how. You just need something to kind of hold on to like a rock. If we really are a community, we have to have ways to show up. Second toolkit. What does it mean to show up? And the third spiritual tool in my theology of fire drills. Why is a question that has no answer. So, with this third tool, why? In 2005, there was a tsunami in the Indian Ocean. It killed hundreds of thousands of people in Southeast Asia. Survivors found several statues of Buddhas unscathed amid collapsed brick walls in temples in Sri Lanka. And a Buddhist monk said the statues were a divine sign that the people are not living according to religious virtues. Or there's some evangelical television show, and there was a hurricane, I don't even remember which one now, and it was supposed to be a sign from God that people were living wrong, blah, 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 blah. Blame, no good. Why? Useless. When traumatized religious leaders say stupid things, ignore them. The thing the Buddhist monk said was cruel, and it wasn't Buddhism, truth be told. I'm not picking on Buddhists. Evangelicals do it. Unitarians sometimes, Universalists sometimes do it. Don't go to blame. Don't try to figure out why. There is no why. There's just no why. And if you're responding to somebody who's suffered a trauma and they're hanging on to a why, oh, this is why, don't grab it from them. Let them have the why. Later on, they'll come back and say, what do you think about why? And then you can say, I don't think there's no why. The second spiritual tool, like the Starhawk said in the reading, when terrible things happen, we get together. We need one another. We need one another to comfort one another. We get together. If something big, terrible happens in the community, you can count on the fellowship being open. We just get together, even if we sit in the room together and support one another. Last spiritual tool, and I have just a moment to finish it up. I have 1 minute. Memorize something. And this is what I recommend, Spirit of Life. We'll sing it next time.